Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
With the White House now asserting that they will block all White House current and former personnel from responding to any congressional subpoenas, with the White House amping up its criticism of former White House counsel Don McGahn for his very effective testimony to the Mueller investigation, particularly about the president's alleged obstruction of justice, with a specific pledge from the Trump White House now that they will try to keep Don McGahn from testifying to Congress, despite the fact that he has already been subpoenaed to testify. There are now today warnings about the behavior of the president and the Trump White House here that are coming from some interesting and unexpected quarters. Quoting from Politico.com today, quote, "This is risky," says William Jeffress, a prominent Washington defense attorney. Jeffress continues, quote, "I find it surprising because the president is taking these shots at witnesses who gave information to Mueller. I think he has got to be careful because there is an explicit federal statute punishing retaliation against witnesses." This is risky, what the president is doing, particularly with Don McGahn. You know, it's one thing if you are the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, you know, you're Congressman Elijah Cummings, or chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Gerald Nadler, and you're out making this kind of argument about how the president is behaving and trying to block witnesses from coming before their committees, how the president might even be in trouble for behaving that way toward potential witnesses before those committees. You might expect that from those players in this drama, right? You would not necessarily expect it from one of President Richard Nixon's lawyers. But that is who William Jeffress is. And that makes it all the more interesting that he's issuing this warning today for the behavior of this president and this White House today. Joining us now is William Jeffress. He's a lawyer who represented President Nixon after he left office. Mr. Jeffress, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's great to have you here.
Good evening, Rachel.
In what sense do you mean that the president's behavior right now might be risky, might be legally risky?
Well, through his tweets, if nothing else, President Trump has made it clear that he's furious at a number of people, certainly including Don McGahn, including Michael Cohen, likely including others, who provided information to Mr. Mueller. And that information made its way into the report and was embarrassing to President Trump. Now, there is a criminal statute on the books. It's called retaliation against witnesses. It punishes anybody who takes action to retaliate against a witness who has provided truthful information to law enforcement authorities. And President Trump and his lawyers have got to be very cautious in taking any action other than words against any of these people who he is angry at.
In terms of when you just said there, other than words, would the kind of criticism that the president has levied already against people who have testified potentially be shaky ground, given the possibility of intimidation of witnesses being invoked here as a relevant statute? Would it have to be some sort of act of furtherance to try to cause harm to those persons? Obviously, we have seen at least one act taken by the White House in that they have fired Don McGahn's law firm, with some White House anonymous sources telling reporters that that was taken specifically in response to Don McGahn essentially becoming an enemy of the White House based on his testimony.
The way the statute reads is, if the president causes any harm to an individual in retaliation for his testimony, that's a criminal offense carrying a prison sentence of up to 10 years. And yes, I think if you caused the firing of a law firm that caused harm to the witness, and you did that specifically with intent to retaliate against the witness's testimony, that would unquestionably be a crime.
Mr. Jeffress, there's an interesting question that is arising now about whether or not the White House can block former White House counsel Don McGahn from testifying. They have expressed that they want to assert executive privilege here. Obviously, this is something that was a very interesting point of contention in the Watergate conflict. A lot of people have said that because Don McGahn testified to the special counsel's office, because his testimony to the special counsel's office was in fact made public in the redacted version of the report that was released publicly, that doesn't give the White House a very strong leg to stand on in terms of claiming that those things that he testified about are covered by privilege and can't be conveyed to Congress. What do you think of that debate?
Well, I agree with the point you just made. The fact that the executive privilege is designed to protect the confidentiality of communications between the president and his staff or between other government officials regarding government policy. None of this is confidential anymore. Don McGahn talked freely to the special counsel. That testimony has been made public, and so long as the Congress confines its questions to Mr. McGahn to the subjects on which he talked to Mr. Mueller, I don't think they have a leg to stand on. But there's another reason. The other reason is Don McGahn's not a government employee. The government doesn't have the right to demand that he keep his mouth shut. This is not attorney-client privilege where McGahn is bound by law or by ethics to keep his mouth shut about communications with the president. He's a former employee. If the White House had the right to instruct former employees not to talk about their conversations with the president, we'd certainly have a lot fewer tell-all books by former White House staffers.
It is Friday, the 26th of April of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Folks, we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life, and the French 77s are all poured and ready for your, Blue Moon Spirits Friday enjoyment. Oh, boy. Are you a chief negotiator? Am I a chief negotiator? Do we know how to spell chief? Yes, I know. I before E except after C. I don't understand. I really don't. I thought he went to the best schools, and he's got the best mind and the best memory, and well, he's something. He's something, that's for sure. And of course, he's defending himself against charges that ransom was paid for Otto Warmbier. And apparently we don't do that. And so why not call it something else, like hospital care? All right, well, pretty expensive hospital care when the guy's in a coma and dies 6 days after he's brought back. How convenient. And I thought Kim didn't know anything about it. Trump went up and with the guy standing right next to him, he knows nothing. I talked to him. Knows nothing. All right, so he was lying there too, huh? But you can't indict a sitting president for lying about policy, apparently. And Rod Rosenstein was giving a speech to a group of lawyers, I believe in New York, and is defending himself against the criticism that has been leveled against him in his handling of the Mueller report and pretty much the investigation, and criticism from both sides of the aisle. And he was just out there saying, hey, it's, we're not here to figure out what's right or wrong. You're not? Well, what was that first page in Mueller's report about then, buddy? But the telling remark that really just stuck in my craw was in his defense of his own behavior in the midst of this. and we would call it a scandal, I suppose. He lauded Trump's respect for the rule of law. His commitment to the rule of law. And I'm thinking, wait a second, I thought you were a cop. and you're letting a mobster tell you what the rule of law is? Give me a break. The guy's a weasel, right? I said he was a weasel from the very beginning. He weaseled his way in. And he's weaseling his way out. So he can weasel some more. And, yeah. And also remind folks, I don't put all stock into the Mueller report. A lot of people in the Bay Area, Northern California, didn't care too much for Mueller when he was U.S. attorney back in the day during W's administration. There were a few things that approached the level of the usual GOP racial animus. Seems to be endemic in that party, and now look where they are. You got Laura Trump out saying the worst thing that ever happened to Germany was letting migrants come in, those asylum seekers. Ugh. Yeah, I guess being a Nazi, you don't think that having Nazi Germany is anything bad for Germany, obviously, Miss Nazi. Yep. This is the world we live in, folks, and I, for one, have no qualms about telling a MAGA-hatted Trumper that they're full of shit. But maybe I have enough girth and, I don't know. Looks like I've gone a few rounds, maybe. Some people back off. So I can get away with it. But I'm not letting them get away with it anymore. They think by bombast and bullying that they can shut everybody up. And that's what they do. In your face constantly with their MAGA shirts and their MAGA hats and Trump 2020. They make themselves so visible, and by their visibility and their brashness and their bullying and their pushing around and their yelling and pointing, they think they can get away with it. And they will, until someone says, hey, you're full of shit. And then they get dissembled. I swear to God, it's true. But do be careful. I'm not suggesting everyone can go out there with impunity. Please don't. Because we know what they're capable of. They let that Coast Guard terrorist out on bail. Judge says, oh, well, you can't prove that he was a terrorist. The guy had a note, wanted to know. Search engines wanted to know what was the best gun to kill Enners with. Yeah, I can't discern if it's a hate crime. Must have been a Federalist Society judge. You think? Yeah, we know. What's on the rest of the menu here today in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Well, of course, at the top, that was a Republican lawyer. In fact, I think that was a Nixon lawyer. Saying that Trump doesn't know it, but his criticism of McGahn is risky. But apparently, Trump and his family are getting away with ignorance is an excuse for not knowing the law. How can a mobster who has based his whole business model on mobster tactics in business get away with ignorance of the law? Sounds corrupt to me. Hey, on the rest of the menu, the Interior Department abruptly paused its offshore drilling plans following major legal setbacks and a rancorous bipartisan uproar. See, the squeaky wheel does get the grease. Trump and Stephen Miller want to grant the administration sweeping authority to go around the courts and deport people even faster. And Twitter said it cannot get rid of Nazis because, well, too many Republicans would get caught up in the ban, which tells you everything you need to know about the Republican Party. After the break, we then moved to the chef's table where a panel of U.S. judges ordered Michigan to revamp nearly 36 Republican-drawn districts in an illegal gerrymandering case. Well, if a Republican is drawing up the districts, it is by definition an illegal gerrymander. And Moroccan police used water cannons to disperse a protest by thousands of young teachers in the capital, Rabat. God, they hate teachers. Everywhere. All that and more. On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link at the rightish of the page, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And I should mention, since it is Friday, do check out her shows on Saturday, the first being the 523 Happy Hour at the Table with Kelly Lincoln, beginning at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. That would, of course, be 6 p.m. on the East Coast. And then a few hours later, she teams up with Ricky May, and they command the late night morning show, and that begins at 9 p.m. on the West Coast. Of course, that is midnight on the East Coast. Thus, the late night morning show with Ricky May and Kelly Lincoln. Check it out. If you would then look to the rightish of the page, of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the contribute link right there at the bottom of the page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, we unfortunately are in a serious mode of savings so that we can purchase new machines and pay our bills. Boy, put those two together and it's fun. Well, we've been a powerhouse of resistance for the last 8 years. Yes, we're celebrating our 8th anniversary of continuous 24/7, 365 resistance radio. And how we've been able to sustain it is really what comes out of our wallets and you, because you are our biggest contributor, and we would be unable to do this without you. So thank you for your generosity, and we're appealing to more of you to maybe, if you could afford an espresso type coffee drink once a month, that goes a long ways to saving that money to buy these machines, and they're getting worn out. It's almost like planned obsolescence. Boy, in fact, it's not just like, it is. So once again, thank you for your generosity in keeping Resistance Radio resisting as the founders originally intended. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it's very simple. Go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom takes care of that wherever he is. He's a busy man. He's on the road doing all the good work that, the founders originally intended. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @Justice Putnam. You can also check out the show notes and links diary. Where am I? Check out the show notes and links diary that I post on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. I then really scramble to get the links on social media in that 10-minute period. Sometimes I go over. Oh, well. There is an introduction to the show. So you can also follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. Of course, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, iHeart, YouTube, and really wherever podcasts can be found. And you can find them everywhere. In fact, I sometimes am amazed all of the little different platforms that I've never heard of, and people are actually getting the show that way. Well, good. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is Out of Think Progress by E.A. Crunden. Interior Secretary David Bernhardt said the agency has abruptly paused its controversial plans to open virtually all U.S. waters to offshore drilling, a stunning reversal after more than a year of bipartisan uproar from coastal communities. I had actually an argument with somebody close to the station quite a few years ago, who was adamantly against wind power because of how ugly the towers were, and it's just bringing down property values. And the argument for not having wind power, offshore wind power, for instance, is that, well, why don't you coastal elites, like out there in Malibu and out there in the Southern California, why don't you like get some like stuff? Well, that's the problem with not knowing America very well, except your own little siloed community. Is there's oil derricks right offshore, and it's not very far away too. I remember back when they camouflaged them, they made them look like small islands. That was cute. It was really fun. You'd go out there and those are real trees. It's fun. Oh yeah. I guess I should confess, I did. I was employed. I was employed by a major oil company for a number of years, and I will say that for the most part, the old fellas that I worked with were very environmentally aware and a bit pissed off about the decisions that the mucky mucks up top always made, because they never had to go down to the wellhead and get their hands dirty and blow things up and kill people with, gas fire and things like that. You don't want that to happen, especially when you're working in it. Okay, so coastal communities, those elites. Well, the news comes as Democratic presidential candidates have started to speak out on the issue. You know something? I'll just jump in really quick. Elizabeth Warren really does come with a lot of policy answers. I mean, she has this policy stuff right on the tip of her fingertips. And I think she's quite charismatic, too. Whatever the repugs say, they say she's boring, which means that she's charismatic and she's got a teacher's way about her. Well, Barnhart said the administration's long-anticipated 5-year leasing plan targeting the outer continental shelf has been sidelined following a federal court decision in Alaska earlier this month. U.S. District Court Judge Sharon Gleason blocked Trump administration efforts to reverse the Obama-era ban on oil and gas leasing in both the Arctic and parts of the Atlantic, determining that Trump had exceeded his authority in challenging the limits on drilling. And most of that is because they're trying to take away the expert opinion, the scientific consensus, and put it in the hands of one man, and Trump determines where the pipeline is laid. Like that guy really knows anything about production and exploration. He could put his name on the pipe. Well, the decision left Department of Interior officials unsure of how to proceed on broader offshore drilling, and that's the court decision. By the time the court rules, that may be discombobulating to our plan, Barnhart said, pointing to the limits of any future efforts to expand offshore drilling in the area. Well, once again, I think that the crux of this whole endeavor is that when it comes home, that's what I mean by rousing the sleeping giant. Dan Desai Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Hey, folks, we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. You know, I really don't appreciate the way that Trump particularly, and his administration and the rest of the GOP more generally just continue to gaslight us. And I really hate the fact that they just are really going all out and trying to impose every Looney Tune right-wing wet dream that they have come up with in the last, 40, 50 plus years. I really don't appreciate it. And I'm not going to be writing a sternly worded letter. No, it won't be in a letter form. The Trump administration has yet another new disturbing anti-immigrant idea, giving itself sweeping authority to deport potentially hundreds of thousands of immigrants much faster than the courts would normally allow. Now think about it. We are talking about issuing subpoenas to get the likes of, a Stephen Miller to appear before Congress, and they, meaning the Trump administration, is just going to ignore it. So do they really think that anyone is going to stand up to them about going around the courts and saying, hey, we're dictators? Stop us. And they look at the Democrats and the rest, they look at us as wimps, is really what it is. Because no one is willing to stand up to the bully. Maybe something drastic needs to be done. Maybe there needs to be a jail in the basement of the House of Representatives. And maybe the Sergeant-at-Arms needs to be more than deputized. Maybe U.S. Marshals need to be, put on the job. And what is that job? Hauling people down who are to appear before the Congress. And if they don't, file contempt charges and throw their ass in the House jail until they comply. Because apparently these crooks, these mobsters, these little petty tyrants don't care about the rule of law, no matter what Rosenstein says. They have no respect, no commitment to the rule of law. The only commitment is to make the rules about the law. And then if you don't follow the orders, Jared will appeal to the better angels of your executioner. I assure you, I have not imbibed in any of the French 77s. They be virtual. But later on, much later on in the day, I might mix one up. Oliver Willis, we affectionately refer to Oliver Willis around here as the great Oliver Willis, brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republicans sound like Nazis too often to make it easy for Twitter to get rid of bigots. This tells you everything you need to know about the repugs. Twitter is running into obstacles and trying to eliminate white supremacists from its platform because the Republican Party has adopted so much of the same rhetoric. Rhetoric? Is that all they've adopted? An employee of the company argued at an internal all-hands meeting that on a technical level, content from Republican politicians could get swept up by algorithms aggressively removing white supremacist material. And that was reported in Vice yesterday, Thursday. Okay, well then ban it. What's the problem? I don't understand. If your task is to get rid of white supremacist hate, Nazi Twitter stuff, get rid of it. My God. Since Trump has become leader of the Republican Party and the wider conservative movement, the right has further embraced racist and divisive ideas and rhetoric. Actually, I don't think that they've really just further embraced. Well, further embraced. They've been embracing it for quite a while. It's just that now they can be overt. Okay, they can throw the Lee Atwater model right out. You don't need to refer to, I don't know, the Jews and the gypsies. Oh, I guess gypsies by that is already a derogatory term. Okay, Romas. Or Catholics or homosexuals or any of them as by some sort of veiled, term like rat. You can just come right out and say, rat Jew. Rat homo. And then everybody can depersonalize them, everybody being like the good Germans. And the next thing you know, you have Kristallnacht. For a company like Twitter, which has been repeatedly criticized for allowing hate to flourish, there appears to be a concern that Republicans could get wrapped up in a dragnet. Well, yeah. I don't understand. If your task is to get rid of Nazi white supremacist Twitter stuff, get rid of it. If your task is to get rid of, beheading videos from ISIS, get rid of it. And just because it happens to be on the Twitter feed of white supremacist Nazi Republicans trying to make a point, get rid of it. But Jack did sit down in a closed-door meeting, with Donnie, because Donnie's, Jack wanted to explain, look, this is, why we're doing what we're doing, and you don't have to worry, you're not going to get kicked off. And Trump said, yeah, but I want all my fake Russian accounts back. My numbers are really low. Well, Trump has repeatedly used his Twitter account to push hateful material. In November of 2017, British Prime Minister Theresa May publicly rebuked Trump for promoting videos from the anti-Muslim hate group Britain First through his account. I'm very clear that retweeting from Britain First was the wrong thing to do, May said. Well, the message didn't work because she got to talk like a mobster to a mobster. Well, Twitter has long struggled with how to create and enforce rules to keep hate speech off its platform. But by so often echoing racists and making their hateful messages so central to the conservative cause, members of the Republican Party, including the party's leader, Republicans have muddied the waters and made it an all but impossible task. And I know I disagree wholeheartedly. It's not an impossible task. If your task is to get rid of white supremacist Nazis on Twitter, get rid of them. It's simple. All right, let's go on to our break, and when we come back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and then we're going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, DC does superhero comedy. The DC universe has a reputation for being dark. From Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins to Patty Jenkins' smash Wonder Woman, few think of DC as light fare. Therefore, it is a bit of a welcome surprise that David F. Sandberg's Shazam is surprisingly funny, despite dealing with fairly serious issues, including child abandonment, family loss, and even the personification of the 7 deadly sins. Simply put, Shazam tells the tale of Billy Batson, a Pennsylvania teen on a journey to find his long-lost mother, who along the way meets a wizard who gives him an array of superpowers. Billy learns that by saying the word Shazam, he can transform himself into an adult superhero. The entire premise of the film is kind of like Big Meat Superman, but that isn't a bad thing. In fact, it actually works well. Aided by his foster brother Freddie, played by an excellent Jack Dylan Grazer, Billy actually learns how to be a superhero, as we see him go from using his powers for laughs, and quite incompetently, to plot advancing good. Simultaneously, and in some of the best scenes, we witness the physically grown-up Shazam learn to be an adult. Throw in a villain with daddy issues, played by British character actor Mark Strong, and Shazam is an entertaining movie that doesn't drag or lose its pace, although some tighter editing in the later chapters would have helped. While the ending may wrap up a bit neatly for some, and the emphasis on the importance of Billy's diverse foster family is a little heavy-handed at times, Shazam remembers a lot of what superhero movies are supposed to be about. It'll likely be eclipsed by the release of the upcoming Avengers movie, but you'll leave the theater having witnessed the birth of a promising franchise for DC. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Lucy Wong.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
Movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Snakes on a Plane, and even Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets have all relied on the fear of snakes to build suspense and anxiety. About a third of all people are at least a bit phobic about snakes. Some of the distress when it comes to the slithering serpents comes from their unpredictable movement patterns, but the fear also stems from knowing that, well, snake bites do kill a lot of people, perhaps as many as 94,000 people annually. But not all snake venom is created equal. Some snakes have venom only strong enough to kill a couple of mice. On the other hand, there's
the inland taipan in Australia, which is incredibly venomous. It has enough potent venom to kill like about 50 adult humans.
Kevin Healy, a lecturer in zoology at the National University of Ireland, Galway. He wanted to know why snake venom toxicity varied so much. So, he and his team looked at 102 different venomous snake species. They examined how much venom the snakes had, as well as what they ate and what kind of habitat they lived in. The key finding?
Bigger snakes have more venom in general, but the increase of that venom increases basically according to how much energy you burn per second, not how big your prey is, as you'd expect.
The study was in the journal Ecology Letters. The researchers also found snakes that inhabited three-dimensional environments that included things like trees and water had less venom than snakes that lived two-dimensionally, that is, on the ground.
Our guess is that comes back to encounter rate. So if you live in a 3D environment, just the pure physics of living in a 3D environment means you will bump into more things. And so what that means is you might not need this really large reservoir of venom to kind of ensure that if you miss a prey item, that you have something for the next time, because you're not going to get to encounter individuals that often.
Whereas the 2D dwelling snakes need to make sure that when they get a chance for a meal, their venom will pack a punch. Of course, only about a quarter of all snake species have venom at all. Keeping that in mind may make it possible to be braver than Indiana Jones. When it comes to snakes, at least. You should still be very scared to crawl under a moving truck. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Lucy Wong.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. In 1948, gold was discovered at John Suter's mill in California. As word spread, fortune seekers from all across the United States and across the world flocked to California in what became known as the Gold Rush. This included thousands from China. Many of the Chinese miners planned to return home with the gold they mined. As the easily accessible gold became more and more scarce due to the rush, resentment grew against foreign miners. In 1850, California passed the Foreign Miners Tax, charging those who came from outside the United States $20 a month. On this day in labor history, the year was 1862. The California legislature passed an act to further limit Chinese miners. The official title was an act to protect free white labor against competition with Chinese coolie labor and to discourage the immigration of the Chinese into the state of California. The word coolie referred to unskilled laborers from China and the Indian subcontinent. It was also often used as a derogatory term for Chinese people. The act implemented new taxes and licensing requirements on Chinese miners. The steep taxes led many Chinese to leave mining. Nearly 12,000 Chinese workers found employment with the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad. They performed extremely dangerous work laying the track through the Rocky Mountains. Yet, when the railroad project was completed, the Chinese workers were excluded from the celebrations. They were also not allowed to ride on the trains that crossed the continent for the first time. Anti-Chinese racism continued to grow. 20 years after the passage of the California law, the federal government passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. This law prohibited the immigration of Chinese labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Now that Joe Biden is officially running, he needs to catch up to the others in fundraising. His first event after his announcement Thursday morning was hosted by Comcast executive David Cohen. The New York Times is reporting that Biden reached out to Anita Hill, a call that she didn't view as a sincere apology for his handling of her testimony during Clarence Thomas's Supreme Court confirmation hearings in 1991. Hill saying the conversation left her feeling, quote, deeply unsatisfied. The focus on apology to me is one thing, she said, but he needs to give an apology to the other women and to the American public because we know now how deeply disappointed Americans around the country were about what they saw. And not just women. There are women and men now who have just really lost confidence in our government to respond to the problem of gender violence. A panel of 3 federal judges ruled Thursday that 34 congressional and state legislative districts in Michigan are extreme partisan gerrymanders and unconstitutional. The judges ordered state lawmakers to redraw maps in time for the 2020 elections. The panel wrote that it was joining the, quote, growing chorus of federal courts that have held that drawing districts to unfairly favor the party in power is unconstitutional. The judge said the maps violated Democratic voters' constitutional rights. But the impact of the ruling ultimately will turn on an opinion by the Supreme Court, which is weighing decisions in 2 other partisan gerrymander cases involving congressional districts in North Carolina and Maryland. The judge's decision in those cases, expected by the end of June, could reinforce the Michigan ruling, force alterations to it, or even overrule it entirely. A federal judge has ruled that a Coast Guard lieutenant accused of planning a domestic terrorist attack will not be charged with terrorism and must be released from detention. We get more from CNN.
He's going to be released, and the judge said that really his alleged crimes don't fit this standard for continued detention. So this is Coast Guard Lieutenant Christopher Hassan. He's been in jail since mid-February. He's accused of plotting a domestic terror attack, but a grand jury has actually only indicted him on weapons and drug charges. So Hassan's public defender saying in court today that the case against Hassan has really been overblown, and the attorney even went so far to say that Hassan's views aren't that different from those of President Trump. Hassan allegedly kept a hit list of Democrats he wanted to kill, and he kept more than a dozen firearms in his apartment. But his attorney said the names that Hassan allegedly assembled weren't actually part of a hit list, but instead, quote, looks like the sort of list that our commander-in-chief might have compiled while watching Fox News in the morning. The defender actually adding to that the racial slurs that Hassan wrote are now part of the, quote, national vocabulary, saying Donald Trump uses similar epithets in his everyday language and tweets. But prosecutors disagreeing. The assistant U.S. attorney in Maryland said Hassan was ready and willing to carry out a massive attack, saying this is combat gear. There is no reason to have this. The defendant intended to take his weapons and go. But the judge here siding with Christopher Hassan, saying that he will soon be released, but still the judge saying he has grave concerns about Hassan, especially because he stockpiled those weapons and even conducted online searches for the home addresses of multiple Supreme Court justices.
The U.S. government has 6 months to identify families it separated before it instituted a zero-tolerance immigration policy last April. In February, the Office of Refugee Resettlement said it was too much of a burden to find the members of these families. Health officials on Thursday issued quarantine orders at 2 Los Angeles universities amid a measles outbreak in Los Angeles County. Students who may have been exposed to the disease and who cannot show verification of immunization must remain in their residences. New reports say that the North Koreans, when handing over Otto Warmbier in 2017, also presented the U.S. with a $2 million bill for his medical care. North Korea insisted the U.S. sign a pledge to pay the bill before releasing Warmbier, an American college student who was held prisoner by the North. He died a few days after arriving home. No confirmation as of yet as to whether or not the bill has been paid. Attorney General William Barr will make 2 appearances before Congress next week to testify publicly about the findings of the Russia investigation conducted by Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Barr will appear on Wednesday before the Republican-led Senate Judiciary Committee, followed on Thursday by a session before the Democratic-controlled House Judiciary Committee. Gallup is out with their big annual report on how happy everyone is or isn't in the world. The latest results, not so good. Levels of sadness, anger, and fear reached record levels in 2018, according to the report based on thousands of interviews with people in 140 countries. The nation of Chad took home the dubious honor of being the world's most unhappy country. And the world's happiest and most positive country, according to this report, that would be Paraguay. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 51 degrees. We are slated for a high of about 80, which means it could be 82. I don't think it's going to be 79. it could be just a tad warm. That's fine. We're having springtime, and it's good. Right now, the winds are out of the southeast or east-southeast and light and variable. We'll be picking up as usual in about an hour to an hour and a half. Pardon me. But we'll have shifted out of the north at a clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour. We'll then continue that clip tonight, but shifting then again out of the northwest, and then the north-northwest in the morning, but increasing to 10 to 15 miles per hour, where we have overnight lows in the low 50s. Tomorrow we're expected to have highs in the low 70s and an overnight low in the mid 40s. Don't do this to me. I'm putting in corn. All right. The grass pollen is moderate. The air quality index has actually come down about 10 points to 25 parts per million. That is in the good range. And the daytime UV index, though it is in the high range, has clicked down one tick to 6. Wow, that's a lot of consonants there. All right, barometric pressure is rising at 29.91 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity has come down to 68%. My. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 62 and mostly cloudy with a weather advisory for severe thunderstorms in the area. Paris is 61 and mostly cloudy with the same weather advisory. And I got to tell you, the boomers in Paris are much more scary than the ones in London. Way scarier. Rome is 65 degrees with a rain shower. Kiev is 75 degrees and fair. Kabul is 65 degrees and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 77 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 55 degrees and mostly cloudy, and they actually have a wind advisory, so take care there. Oh, my gosh. Sydney, Australia is 63 degrees and fair. That's rather chilly. San Francisco, California is 51 and cloudy, and you would expect that. And New York is 55 degrees and cloudy with a weather advisory, and yes, it is a small craft advisory, so do take care if you're on the waterways in New York. And that is Weather from Around the World, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Joseph Axe of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A panel of federal judges ordered Michigan's Republican-controlled legislature to redraw nearly 36 state and U.S. congressional districts, ruling that the existing lines illegally dilute the power of Democratic voters. The Republicans will obviously say there's nothing illegal about that. The Democrats are the enemy. And that's how we are considered to them. I swear to God. The decision gives lawmakers until August 1st to approve new district maps, which would need to be signed by Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Of course, the legislature is trying to take away all power that she may have. They do that. It's like a coup. If legislators fail to do so, or if the court finds the new district lines are similarly unconstitutional, the judges said that they would draw the maps themselves. The redrawn districts would take effect in time for the 2020 elections. And the court also ordered Michigan to hold special state Senate elections next year rather than in 2022 in any gerrymandered districts. The state's 14 seats in the U.S. House of Reps are also up for election next year, and a majority of them could have new boundaries under the court's ruling. Now, we know the decision is likely to be a boon for Democrats, who failed in 2018 to win a majority of the seats in the House of Representatives, State Senate, or the state's U.S. congressional delegation, despite winning the overall popular vote in all three cases. Now, the Supreme Court has historically been reluctant to assert judicial oversight over what has always been a political undertaking. The judges in the Michigan case said the gerrymandered map gives Republicans a strong, systematic, and durable structure advantage in Michigan's elections and decidedly discriminates against Democrats. The result is a violation of Democratic voters' constitutional right under the First Amendment to freely associate, the court said. Federal courts must not abdicate the responsibility to protect American voters from this unconstitutional and pernicious practice that undermines our democracy. Of course, the Republicans said that they're about ready to appeal, and they will comply with this most recent ruling while they wait the outcome of that appeal. And the lawsuit was filed by a number of Democratic voters and by the League of Women Voters of Michigan. And, of course, we know Michigan was key to 2016 election results that allowed Trump to be installed as president. The state is likely to be a major battleground next year when Trump runs for a second term.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Moroccan police used water cannons to disperse a protest by thousands of young teachers in Rabat, the capital, yesterday, Thursday, according to witnesses. Around 65 protesters were injured. Adabullah Galat, one of the organizers, said one of the teachers got seriously wounded. Authorities could not be reached for comment because they were still on the water cannons, obviously, and you know how powerful those can be. Teachers have been staging a series of protests and striking to demand an end to renewable contracts in favor of permanent jobs that offer civil service benefits, including a better retirement pension. What are they, socialists? The protesters had arrived from several parts of the kingdom and tried to camp out in front of Parliament until police dispersed them. Education Minister Saeed Amzazi has threatened to sack teachers if they do not return to classrooms, saying the strike has affected 7% of Morocco's 7 million students. That's a lot of sevens. Morocco, which has avoided the turmoil seen by other countries during and after the Arab Spring of 2011, regularly sees protests, though, and they rarely involve confrontations with police. Some 55,000 teachers out of the 240,000 total have been hired on renewable contracts by regional education delegations since 2016 to address overcrowding in rural classrooms. Morocco increased the education budget in 2019 as it seeks to boost access and improve infrastructure, notably in hard-to-reach areas. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for not only the day, but the week. And you know we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. And Netroots Radio is going to be broadcasting on, and you should listen to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.